Greetings and welcome. You're tuned into TMH Daily English News. The headlines for today: the Tigray government says it is of the essence in efforts towards peaceful resolution of the current crisis within Ethiopia. Analysts have revealed hate media in Ethiopia has served a tool for genocide. A UN rapporteur says Eritreans were forcibly recruited as soldiers for the Tigrayan war. The government of Tigray says time is of essence in the efforts towards the peaceful resolution of the current crisis within Ethiopia, and it also refuted that Addis authorities' false claims regarding the closure of Mekelle airport. Timnit Bayru has more on this story.
The government of Tigray says time is of the essence in efforts towards peaceful resolution of the current crisis in Ethiopia. It also refuted the Addis authorities' false claims regarding the closure of Mekelle airport. The government of Tigray released a statement on the visit of the high-level EU delegation led by the Commissioner for Crisis Management and Humanitarian Aid, Juarez Lenarchik, to Mekelle on June 21, 2022. In the statement, the government of Tigray urged the EU to play a constructive role in peaceful resolution of the crisis. Only a credible, tangible, and expeditious peace process could bring about a lasting resolution to the current crisis and prevent the resumption of fighting. According to the statement, President Debretsion underlined the imperativeness of holding the perpetrators of massive humanitarian rights violations accountable through a credible, independent investigation to be conducted by an impartial international entity. The government of Tigray expressed readiness to extend all necessary cooperation to independent investigators and accept their verdict. President Debretsion reiterated the fact that the Eritrean army continues to occupy large swaths of Tigray, continuing to commit heinous atrocities against Tigrayans and impending efforts at finding a peaceful resolution of the crisis. Amhara forces continue to occupy western Tigray, committing unimaginably brutal atrocities against Tigrayans. The statement said the international community should insist on the withdrawal of the invading Eritrean army and Amhara forces from Tigray. The government of Tigray emphasized its full support for international efforts, including the EU's, at removing the brutal siege, facilitated unfettered humanitarian access, bringing about a negotiating ceasefire, ensuring the withdrawal of all invading forces from Tigray, and supporting an investigation independent into all atrocities committed during the course of the war on Tigray, as well as holding perpetrators accountable for their crime. According to the statement, the people and government of Tigray are grateful to the EU in general and the Commissioner in particular for the humane position they have adopted with respect to such issues as the need for unimpeded humanitarian access, justice for the victims of heinous atrocities, the peaceful resolution of conflict, and the restoration of their pre-war status quo ante. In another statement, the government of Tigray refuted the Addis authorities' false claims regarding the closure of Mekelle airport. According to the statement, the authorities in Addis issued a bizarre statement replete with the usual lies and distortions, blaming the government of Tigray for the closure of the airport in Mekelle as of yesterday. The authorities in Addis are once again lying through their teeth as they seek to hoodwink the international community into ignoring their ultimate culpability for the devastating humanitarian crisis ravaging Tigray. The statement noted that the airport has ceased operations because of the government of Tigray run out of fuel to run it. In fact, we had consistently communicated the elevated risk of the airport ceasing operations to our humanitarian partners due to severe fuel shortage. The government of Tigray said it is doing everything in its power to ensure the resumption of services at the airport, adding that the authorities in Addis are engaged in what they are best at, propagating utterly false claims and smearing the people and government of Tigray. The statement implored the international community to see through what it called transparent subterfuge and take appropriate measures to rectify the situation.
As the delivery of humanitarian aid still becomes a struggle, Ethiopian government has called Tigray's fuel shortage a myth. A European Union official who visited Tigray this week and on Tuesday said a lack of fuel is preventing delivery of much-needed humanitarian aid supplies. However, a spokeswoman for Ethiopia's prime minister told VOA that the idea of a fuel shortage in Tigray is just quite simply a myth. European Union Commissioner for Crisis Management Juarez Lenarchik said Tigrayans have suffered enough due to the continuous aid blockage. He said at a news conference in Addis Ababa on Tuesday that the number of trucks bringing food to the regional capital in Mekelle has almost reached the level of necessary to cover the basic humanitarian needs of the people of Tigray. But however, he said the aid efforts need more fuel so that the humanitarian workers can in fact deliver the assistance to all that are in need. There's a need to lift restrictions, especially on the provision of fuel, he said. More fuel is needed because without it, even this food assistance that comes to Mekelle cannot reach rural areas where their needs are actually the highest. Lenarsic, added that the people out here in the countryside are still very much hungry. He also urged Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government to lift financial restrictions, and he said that hampering the provision of basic services, such as payment of salaries to humanitarian workers and hospital employees who have gone without pay for over a year now. I fail to see the military rationale behind the blockade of electricity banking services, as Lenarsic said. He said that these services should be restored without delay because they are primarily destined for civilian use. However, the Ethiopian federal government denies any blockades, especially on fuel, and the spokeswoman for Abiy Ahmed, Belene Siyom, said myth of fuel shortage is a TPLF hidden agenda to enhance mobility of its army in preparation for another round of conflict. On its Twitter account, the Tigray External Affairs Office insists the level of aid being allowed into Tigray does not meet the region's needs and says between April and early June, just over 770,000 liters of fuel have been allowed into Tigray. In a text message to VOA, member of the Tigray Armed Forces Central Command, Getachew Reda, accused the Abiy Ahmed's government of misrepresenting facts, adding that the fuel shortage in Tigray is as vicious as creating unnecessary checkpoints or other obstacles aimed at hindering humanitarian access. Apparent recognition by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed that his forces cannot defeat the Tigrayans is moving the parties toward the negotiating table. Alex DeWall of the World Peace Foundation, writing on responsible statecraft, said that there's talks of peace in Ethiopia and it is in fact for real. He added, however, that there's a long and torturous road before the country can see an end to the fighting, starvation, and slow-motion state collapse. For 6 months now, the war between the federal government in Addis Ababa and the Tigray region has been in a stalemate. Neither can defeat the other, and it appears each no longer has the ambition to try to do so, as wrote DeWall on his piece. Since early May, stories have been circulating about secret talks between them. According to the analysts, Abiy Ahmed's steps towards peace have been faltering. This follows his halting steps towards meeting an essential demand of the Tigrayans, which is ending the starvation blockade and allowing humanitarian aid to flow into the Tigray region. The reason is that Abiy is indebted to powerful forces that are determined to crush Tigray, namely the Amhara regional government and the neighboring Eritrea, ruled by its bellicose dictator Isaias Afwerki. Eritrea signaled its displeasure with Abiy Ahmed's peace overtures, claiming that the Tigrayans were in fact planning to attack Eritrea, which was a sure sign that Eritrea is seeking a pretext for a military action of its own. Obasanjo's sudden burst of energy appears to have been prompted by progress in a parallel Kenyan initiative and a signal from Abiy Ahmed that he was at least last ready. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta took the mantle of mediator following his meeting with President Joe Biden in October. As a concerned neighbor, the favored partner of the United States in Europe and East Africa, and a member of both the UN Security Council and the African Union Peace and Security Council as well, Kenya has discreetly built a credible peace initiative, and it's backed by Washington as well as the United Arab Emirates. The Tigrayan president, Debretsion Gebremichael, wrote an open letter to Kenyatta and other leading international figures in which he made a crystal clear his position that he was in fact ready to negotiate under Kenyan auspices and not Obasanjo's, and he made no reference to Obasanjo's Arusha meeting, but pointed including Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan as one of the addressees, implicitly inviting her to support the Kenyans. He also addressed Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, now president of the UAE, having been an enthusiastic supporter of both Abiy Ahmed and Eritrea's Isaias Afwerki as well. The UAE has recently moderated its stance. It sent aid directly to Tigray and, with U.S. encouragement, now sees itself as a broker for peace. Most significantly, Debretsion wrote, "We hold firm to the existing agreement among the parties to meet in Nairobi for negotiations hosted and facilitated by the President of Kenya," as DeWall says, and that this is called Abiy's bluff, that Debretsion in fact signaled that talks had already been held and that the agreement on the mediator had been reached. Speaking to the BBC, Tigrayan diplomat Fisaha Asgadom enumerated 5 key negotiating points. the restoration of Tigray's pre-conflict boundaries, a referendum on self-determination, an international process of accountability for atrocities, compensating for the losses, as well as Tigray's retaining its own army. Tigrayans are also negotiating against a deadline, says DeWall. The famine is deepening and the rainy season has arrived, and crops are now being planted, but they will need fertilizer in the next month if there is to be any decent harvest left. Tigray is blockaded with no commercial traffic, no banking services, and no telecoms, and there's only one trickle of aid. If the siege isn't lifted, the popular clamor for the Tigray army to break the encirclement will be hard for the leadership to resist. DeWall says Abiy Ahmed faces the trickiest path when he built a coalition for war. He dismantled the constituency for peace. He now faces the ruins of both, but needs a credible peace process for his own survival. And again, according to Alex DeWall, Abiy's political talents lie in style, not in substance, and he has shown no understanding of how peace negotiations should in fact be managed. His political philosophy of quote-unquote medemer, also known as synergy, was warmly received because it had no content. Anyone could make it of what they wanted, and his PhD thesis betrays ignorance of the theories and the precepts of peacemaking. The photographs of his examination show an array of security bosses in seats behind him, which no doubt impressed his examiners. Abiy's political skill is keeping his rivals and opponents off guard and doesn't extend to hammering out a political statement or running a state at all. A workable peace process will demand patience and forbearance from Ethiopians and the former from the mediators as well. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back after this ad. Thank you.
588 plus days of pain must end. The young, the elders, the women, the men, the fathers and mothers, including veteran fighters, are giving up everything and sacrificing their lives. The people of Tigray have suffered immeasurably, yet stand together unwaveringly. They are saying no to invasion, rape, killing, starvation, siege, and genocide. Tigray is calling, and the people at home are responding with everything they have. So should you, the diaspora. All of us must heed Tigray's call to end the suffering. 19 months of quagmire must end now. 6.5 million people are in dire need of food and medicine. Women, children, and elders are paying the highest price. With every person that perishes goes a piece of us, a piece of our history, a piece of our heritage, a piece of our pride, and a piece of our identity. Agony must end. Victory is imminent, but only if we unite and rally behind Makata 3. Tigray is pleading. Think of the starved, the sick, the raped, the kids out of school for 2 years. Donate today. Tell family and friends to donate. Spread the word beyond our communities to all peace and justice-loving people. Youth, you play a vital role and must heed the call and find creative means to mobilize your peers. Yes, your donation matters to help end the suffering, which will save lives and bring peace and stability. Donate now. Tigray is calling. Will you answer the call?
Welcome back. You're still tuned into TMH's Daily English News. As we move on to our next update, Ethiopian ambassador to South Sudan walks out of an event over criticism of his government. Ethiopia's ambassador to South Sudan walked out of an event to mark World Refugee Day after an asylum seeker from Tigray spoke out about the war currently taking place in Ethiopia. South Sudan in Focus reported that the woman, Kadusan Aragai, said she was targeted for supporting Tigrayan refugees in South Sudan. Let's take a listen.
This lady, we know that she is member organizer of TPLF. TPLF is recognized by our parliament as terrorist party. Even though Our government is trying its best to settle the conflict of Tigray peacefully. She is the chairman of TPLF committee here, organizing committee. They are engaged in a lot of illegal activities. If we are serious on her, she might be deported automatically.
She said, "I sought asylum in South Sudan, processing any documentation with my governor." Nabil Mahdi tried to deny the accusations, but also blamed the organizer of the event, UNHCR, for allowing her to speak out and tried to threaten her with deportation. The ambassador finally stormed out in complete anger. Analysts reveals hate media in Ethiopia has served as a tool of this ongoing genocide. An article published on Tigrai titled "Ethiopia's Hate Media Soundtrack to Tigray's Genocide" showed that Ethiopia's hate media developed and disseminated anti-Tigrayan hate rhetoric over decades. The articles noted that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was unable to wage a genocidal war on Tigray, identified as the deadliest war in the world today, with the unwavering support of a lot of hate media. The anti-Tigray hate propaganda has become official, state-sponsored, mainly spearheaded by such hate and party-affiliated media corporations as the Ethiopian Broadcasting, Fana Broadcasting, and Walta Information and Amhara Media included. According to the analysts, it is difficult to contest that Ethiopia's mainstream media has played a mammoth role in enabling the ongoing genocide against the Tigrayan ethnic minority, and a review of some propaganda themes that have been exploited by these media shows that Tigray's genocide is a result of among confluence of other factors and the cumulative effect of systematic hate media rhetoric. Through their hate propaganda against the people of Tigray, Ethiopia's hate media profusely employs a method that obfuscates the border between the people of Tigray and TPLF. First, they defame TPLF as the problem child of Ethiopia, and then they claim all Tigrayans are TPLF. By blurring that border and that line, they systematically campaign for the extermination of both. The hate media rhetoric portrayed by Tigrayan elites and the Tigrinya speakers as economic oligarchs and the fountainhead of the corporation in the country, and blame them of committing human rights abuses, of being anti-reform, though rational voices like Lidatu Ayalo have dispelled these accusations. And according to the analysts, Ethiopia hate media have enabled, supported, and legitimized the Ethio-Eritrea-Amhara genocidal war on Tigray as an essential measure of national defense. As we move on to our final update for today, Amhara opposition's MPs walked out of the parliament in protest against the speaker's refusal to add what they claimed as killing of the Amharas in Oromia region as an agenda for discussion. For members of the parliament representing the opposition national movement of the Amhara walked out of an ongoing preliminary session convened to receive the Federal Auditor General 2021 Audit Performance Report from last Tuesday. The MPs walked out of the session after their requests were reviewed, and the number of people killed on Saturday, June 18th, in Tole Qabala, Gembi Warada of West Walaga Zone, is now reported to have reached about 260 civilians, making it one of the deadliest in recent months. It is to be remembered that before these reported killings, a video has been circulating on social media, apparently of the Fano Amhara vigilante group dragging people from trucks and then shooting them. UN Rapporteur says Eritreans were forcibly recruited as soldiers, and for the Tigray war to continue, a report on the situation of human rights in Eritrea presented to the 50th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council, titled "The Situation of Human Rights in Eritrea," highlights the application of force in gathering recruitments for military services within the country. A special rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea, Mohammed Abdesalam Babkir, has put the spotlight on reports of forced recruitment of people, including children, by Eritrea to fight in the ongoing conflict in the northern region of Tigray of Ethiopia. Let's take a listen.
Thousands of conscripts have been forced to participate in the Tigray conflict, with men, women, and children being swept up and sent to fight in the front lines. Previously documented patterns of child recruitment by Eritrean forces have worsened, with witnesses referring to the roundup of children as young as 14. Refugees who had been kidnapped from Hetsas and Shemelba camps in Ethiopia in late 2020 have also been detained, punished, and conscripted.
In the UN session, which is taking place in Geneva from the 13th of June to the 8th of July, Babaker highlighted the continuing involvement of Eritrea in the war in Ethiopia, which is an important implication for the internal human rights situation within the country. The report identified some worrying trends in Eritrea, noting the increased militarization of the country and the use of military conscription raids, or quote-unquote GIFA, to enlist people to go to the front lines. The rapporteur recommended an investigation into abductions and forced returns of Eritrean refugees and asylum seekers into Eritrea and their subsequent military subscriptions, as well as the investigation into the allegations of human rights and humanitarian law violations within Ethiopia. They also called for the immediate withdrawal of Eritrean forces from Ethiopia and the abstination from obstructing the access of humanitarian, personal food, and supplies to the country as well. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.